I never thought I'd see the day, but a comic book movie has finally eclipsed The Dark Knight on IMDb's list of superhero movies. So we'll share our thoughts on Across the Spider-Verse, and I'll reveal if I agree with this list or not. This is Tatooine Sons.
It's the Speaking Nerdy podcast with your host, Mr. Mike Schilling.
And my good friend and compadre, Mr. Ricky Poe.
Every Friday, Mike and I talk about nerdy fandoms, the latest nerdy news, and Mike tries to make me laugh by sharing stupid news that often starts with a Florida man. We're glad to be part of the Christian Nerd HQ podcast network. You can catch us on all of your favorite podcast apps or on YouTube at youtube.com/speakingnerdy. Be sure to check out speakingnerdy.com for even more great content from us.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody was lit.
They lost their minds.
Yeah, when we saw it.
Not as much. They did a little bit.
A little bit
the
first
yesterday.
time.
Not the first
really.
Time.
It was
the
only like
first
one
time
group.
They didn't really get upset at all.
No reactions during the entire movie, really. I mean, a couple here and there for a couple big things, but overall, there wasn't as much as it was this Friday night when we
Friday
went to
night,
see
there
it.
was a group of people that were losing their minds about everything.
That's
right?
true.
Like Peter
But
B.
the
Parker shows up on screen and they scream. That's not even a joke. But then we get to the to be continued at the end, and
Yes.
Nate, what happened?
The entire place lost their minds. Like, the entire
theater, packed theater, lost their minds.
No, you've got to be kidding me.
And then the old guy sitting in
front of us
turned around and started yelling at everybody and telling them to get a life.
Yep. And then went out of the theater.
Yeah. Anyway, so welcome to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, that there is a story, it is written on our souls, and that these myths speak to that story. And that is why we're talking about Across the Spider-Verse. Originally Across the Spider-Verse Part 1.
Pay
which is
attention
why
to the trailers, people.
Two of us weren't surprised. Sam, you were surprised.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that. Once Nathan explained to me that was the case from the beginning, I remembered. But going into the movie, the first watching, I did not remember the fact that, this was a part 1 of part 2 story, or of a 2-part story. So I was surprised. We were getting, close to that 2.5 hour mark of the movie, and I'm like, there's still a lot to wrap up, and it feels like they're about to end this, and sure enough they did, which I'm fine with. I'm fine with a to be continued.
It's cliffhanger.
Yeah, I
love
like
that kind of stuff.
It's good. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Obviously, we're talking about Across the Spider-Verse. We'll give our ratings here in just a second, but I'm just curious, just overall, what's your reactions having seen it? Now, Nathan, you've seen it three times. I've seen it 3 times. Sam, you've seen it twice. Overall, what was your reaction to Across the Spider-Verse? Here, I'll do it this way. In relation to Into the Spider-Verse and another Spider-Man multiverse story, which is No Way Home. I'll start with you, Samuel the Hutt.
Well, expectations were fairly high for this movie. And it blew past them,
really,
in my mind. Oh, absolutely. Compared to the 2 movies that you mentioned, Into the Spider-Verse and No Way Home, this takes the cake from the 3 easily. There's no doubt.
If you were
in
to
my
rank
mind.
the 3,
that's easy.
All right, I'll let you go for you, Nate. You said
should I rank the 3?
Yeah, rank the 3 and then give your
Across the Spider-Verse.
Yes,
I mean, number 1 easily. Into the Spider-Verse, because I really loved the stories in that one, and it led into this movie, which was also great. And then No Way Home. Not to say I didn't love No Way Home.
It had your boy
It's a really
Andrew.
good movie. It has my boy Andrew, but so did Across the Spider-Verse. But no, No Way Home's good, but it doesn't have as compelling of a story as Into the Spider-Verse or nowhere near Across the Spider-Verse the story it has. And so stories are important for me, and so when you kind of forget that for action and big fan moments, which I feel like No Way Home did at some points, Into the Spider-Verse and beyond and Across the Spider-Verse will take the cake there.
What about you?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
You rank
Across
them.
the Spider-Verse is by far. I mean, it might be my favorite superhero comic book movie of all time. With that, it was that good. We were just recently in the build-up for Across the Spider-Verse rewatched Into the Spider-Verse, which I don't recall seeing more than once or twice when it originally
I think you only
came
watched
out.
it once, maybe. I think you watched it in theaters.
And I remember liking it the first time and watching it the second time, or whenever it was when I watched it recently, thinking, this is a really good movie.
Yep.
I would probably put No Way Home second just because there was so much about that movie that was just amazing with it actually them doing it, bringing in Toby, bringing in Andrew, bringing them in the way that they did, even the crossover with Venom at the end. It was the first time that we saw the Spider-Verse or the arachnid polynoid multiverse. I think that's what Miguel calls it. I forgot. I had it already earlier today.
Anyways.
Spider-Verse is better.
Yeah, I think
Spider-Verse
Spider-Verse. Anyway, that was the first time we saw that happen, so it was great. So,
Yeah.
But listen, that's all
the first time we saw it happen, though. Into the Spider-Verse was first. It was before
the first time we saw the crossovers with the MCU level.
Okay.
Crossovers.
But I mean, I think about it from this perspective. If I have the options of watching Into the Spider-Verse or No Way Home, I feel like I'm going to choose Into the Spider-Verse
That's fair
before it.
Yeah, I agree.
No Way Home's good, but I just enjoy the characters and the writing more in Into the Spider-Verse.
Let's enough talking about what we're going to talk about. Let's talk about what we're talking about. Let's actually get into the conversations about the specifics with this. So I want to go a rating of 1 to 10 obscure variant spider persons. Because there's a lot of obscure.
There's even the so-so
The
popsicle.
So-so popsicle
That
from
was
the first
awesome.
movie.
Yes,
and they had a plush
chasing
a plush Spider-Man
Miles
was in it
Morales
too,
and throughout,
which is crazy
A
because
plush what?
a plush Spider-Man was chasing him too. You saw it; it's like in there for maybe 2 frames, but I saw it and I'm like, I had that plush. When
I think I know what plush you're
you
talking
know
about.
exactly one
Yeah.
I'm talking. It was crazy to see that. I'm like,
That's
oh my
funny.
gosh.
That's so cool. Start with you, Samuel. 1 to 10.
Oh man. I'm hesitant to give it a 10, but I almost want to give this movie a 10.
Wow.
I mean, it was.
Is that as a result of the second viewing, or would you have said that after the first viewing?
I think I would have said that after the first viewing, but the second viewing helped solidify that in my
that's fair.
mind. It is a fantastic movie all around. It is a great movie.
All right.
Yeah.
BB Nate, 1 to 10 obscure variant spider persons.
I don't know.
You're a little bit tougher critic sometimes.
I am. It's a really good movie. I'm trying to go through it, and I genuinely can't think of something I didn't enjoy. In it. I can't think of a time I felt bored. I can't think of a time that when I go to rewatch it, I'm like, ugh, I gotta get through this part to get to the cool parts. There isn't any of that. So I feel like it deserves it's earned its 10. Because the writing is amazing. The characters are awesome. While Gwen isn't into the Spider-Verse all that much, she was a fun character in the first one. She's so much more important in this one and has kind of become the tide for the main character in this story with Miles from this movie. And that's not something I'm frustrated about. Miles still is the main character, but Gwen is now
definitely
very
going to talk
important.
about that.
So, yeah, I think it's earned its 10.
It's 10
from my 3 watches so
Me?
far.
9.5.
9.5. You don't give anything.
I don't give anything a 10. It's not a perfect movie. There's nothing perfect when it comes to movies. I wouldn't have even given The Last Jedi a 10.
What'd you
when we
give The
watched
Last Jedi?
I would have probably given that like a 9. There are some things in there I would have done differently, but
Canto Bite, no,
no, not Canto Bite. I've got on record with those things.
No,
I don't need to rehash them here. This isn't about The Last Jedi, but yeah, I would definitely put it at a 9.5. It was a phenomenal movie. And it just so happens to be animated, and it just so happens to be a superhero movie.
Yep. Yeah, that's the best
and that's one of the reasons that I love it. The story, the characters, the visuals are beyond anything that I can like even put into words, especially the visuals.
Yeah, I was going to say
this story can only be told in animation.
Yep.
With it was like watching. You know, you could say it's like watching a comic book on screen, but it's even more than that because it's the comic book comes alive. It literally brought a comic book to life.
Yeah.
I'm going to, kind of veer off track from what our plan was for just a second here. Nate, you're the resident comic book super nerd in the family.
Okay.
On the show, right? Help me communicate what I'm trying to say when I say that this is a comic book coming to life on the screen.
So, there's motion comics which have happened before. It's literally just comics, but they animate some certain parts, and so you might think that it's that. It's not. It's taking what we would know from a comic and taking the feeling that you get when reading a comic and certain aspects from it, and just animating out those scenes, adding things to it. It's basically reading a comic book. But instead of it being pictures, it's just genuine animated scenes.
They like fill in the blanks between the panels.
Right. And they even have editor notes during this movie, which is such a little thing that's so awesome. The whole hammer space definition and the definition of what Scooby-Doo means when Spider-Punk says it. And it's just such an awesome way to portray comic books into a movie. It is a comic book
it's more than that
movie.
too, though. It's the framing of scenes, and
certain scenes have multiple panels going on, like multiple different.
Yeah, I'm the one that always hits me when I think about this is in the opening segments before we even get to the title card and all of that. When you've got the conflict happening over whether or not Spider Woman is evil or not, and it's the argument between George and Gwen, right? Captain Stacy and Gwen in her bedroom just before she goes to take on the Vulture and all of the things that happen with that, right? And she's trying to explain to her dad that maybe Spider Woman isn't the bad guy, and they're having this conflict, and you've got two different frames of a comic book on screen. It's framed and everything. And you've got a distant view of Captain Stacy, and you've got a close-up headshot of Gwen, and that's when they're having the conversation. And it felt like I was watching a comic book panel on screen. And that is just a small taste of what you get throughout this entire movie. It was beautiful.
And the varying art styles are beautiful, especially Gwen's world. Like, especially when they,
I love Gwen's world.
Yeah,
It's
when they
so
have
awesome.
An intimate conversation, the background kind of fades away to these different.
Explain what you were
pastel
talking about,
coloring.
the different colors with Gwen and Captain Stacy, especially in the confrontation after the Vulture battle, right?
So when Gwen reveals her identity to Captain Stacy, and she's trying to kind of relate to him and kind of say, just stop being a cop for a minute and be my dad.
Be
and
my
all this
dad,
stuff.
right?
And behind her, the background, it's her colors of Spider Gwen and all that stuff. And even they showed like the eyes and all that. It's who she is. It's her mask. It's her badge that she mentions later on. It's the badge that she picks up. And then when you switch to Captain Stacy, behind him is two white bars on the side and then a blue line, which is what we know is relating to cops. And shining on him is red and blue sirens. So it's showing that that's his badge. That's what he needs to do. And they're having this conversation. They're both like that. And sometimes you see that background fade away from Captain Stacy. Probably the moments when he's starting to become dad again. But then has to figure out,
especially
I gotta be a
in
cop.
the final scenes with them.
He's like, I got to be a cop again. And then it just... he fully becomes a cop, and then that's when she goes with Spider Society and all that stuff.
It's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about Gwen, because she really steals this movie in a lot of ways. I mean, Miles is amazing, right? And he's the main character, of course, and it's his story. But
well, she's the breakout star.
Without a doubt. And Haley Steinfeld does an amazing job voicing this character. And she did in Into the Spider-Verse too. But
it's different in this one.
She does. It starts, I think it's, how long is that opening segment? It's like a good 10, 15 minutes.
It has to be like, 15 minutes.
I think this may be the part that they originally showed at like CinemaCon.
Yeah.
I think what did they show?
No, they showed the Gwen and Miles like swinging around the city.
Oh, okay.
And their
So they're like
conversations and all that stuff.
Reuniting. Let's talk about all of that. The reintroduction, finding out her story. We knew from Into the Spider-Verse that she had a tragic backstory, like all the Spider persons, right?
Spider people.
No, it's persons.
I think it's people.
Persons. Anyway. All of them have. And did we know, though, from Into the Spider-Verse that the details of the story of the death of Peter Parker and how...
Well, you can kind of pick up on it.
I don't remember it. So
she mentions how she lost her best friend Peter, and you kind of see that scene a little bit play out.
But do you know that he's, the
lizard?
The lizard.
Yes, you do.
Oh, you do?
You do.
Okay. I couldn't remember that. But what was it like for you guys, to start with you, Sam, seeing that whole, because it's briefly mentioned in Into the Spider-Verse. It's not
Very
fleshed out
quickly.
at all. This whole scene fleshes that out, but it's more than just fleshing out the story of the tragic death of her best friend, but it's also the tension between her and Captain Stacy, her dad, and how that all plays into how it drives the way she thinks going into the rest of the movie. Explain, what that opening sequence was like when you watched it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way they integrated it with her being like on the drums and stuff, and kind of like she's reliving those moments and like bringing it out in the drumming and stuff, which is kind of cool. I like how each character kind of has their unique characteristic, like hers is drumming and then Miles is like graffitiing, things like that. But
I hadn't thought about that.
But the details are, it helps us see why Gwen and Miles are so similar, because they're both found with someone they care about shortly after death by their dad cop, who then thinks that they killed such and such, right? Captain Stacy thought that she killed Peter. Miles' dad thought that he killed Aaron. Obviously, they
resolved
figured that one out. But and then that creates this tension from then on. She has to live with her dad constantly being like, hey, I think we're about to make a big break on the Spider-Gwen thing and case or whatever, Spider-Woman case. And she has to be able to she wants to be able to tell him something, but she can't. So she just has these little jabs like, yeah, maybe she's not who you think she is, and all of that. But it's this stark contrast also between her and Miles, where with her and her dad, it's like this bomb that's waiting to go off because she's wanted for murder, right? With Miles and his dad, it's like oh man, I'm about to get grounded real hard for this, but he thinks that it's this massive deal, while when she says to him on the bank tower, like, don't tell your parents, it's coming from a very different place than where Miles is coming from. So it's this contrast yet similarity that we get that we wouldn't have understood had they just glossed over that part of her story.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're sitting there on the bank tower. Actually, they're on the underside, upside down,
which is a cool scene.
Everything about that. I mean, even to this point where they created the animation to where you could tell
they're hanging upside down.
They're hanging upside down, like on their facial expressions and things. It's just so good. I mean, did you notice that watching it?
Yeah, I did.
I was like, yeah, that's
because I was thinking about that too. I'm like, when you're upside down, your face looks different.
And it did. But they're hanging there, and that's when Miles says, "We're the same." In all the important ways.
Right.
And that's exactly what you're talking about. What was your thoughts on that opening segment, BB Nate?
It was great. It's one of the coolest recaps we've seen in movies. I mean, it's so... it's short, but it gives you what you need to know about the last movie and does it in such a way that it's different than you would get from just watching a normal recap. It looks awesome. The backing track of her drumming is awesome. And then you have the points of the first of her, and you're kind of getting into her story after that. And it's not just her giving a recap and then going into a title card for Miles. It's this, and then you get the Vulture, which is an awesome action sequence too. It's so cool. He's such a cool villain from that era and that universe, and then he's doing like the whole hammer space thing where he's making his other wing after it's cut off again, and it was awesome. And Miguel was fun in it, and Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, was fun in it as well, and it was just an awesome scene. And then the conflict between Captain Stacy and Gwen was really important and impactful, and definitely was needed for the ending of the movie and how that was going to work out, and was needed even for the middle of the movie and the whole ASM 90 aspect of the
that was cool. Amazing
story.
Spider-Man issue 90.
Mm-hmm. So it was really just an awesome opening sequence. I really liked it.
You know, you guys are talking about, as you specifically, Sam, were mentioning how, and we talked about it just a second ago, but they're the same, right? They have the same backstory in a lot of ways, right? They both saw someone they loved intensely, that they cared for. They died
in their arms
with their father, who was a police officer, overlooking that and misjudging what's going on and all of that. That kind of ties into the idea of these canon events, which I didn't pick up on that phrasing early in the movie the first time I watched.
No, I didn't either.
It really, it only starts to pick up when we're in, is it Moombahton? Moombaton? I don't know how to pronounce
it. It's like Manhattan, but
that makes sense now.
Can you just cut that?
Moombaton.
Moombaton. That makes a lot more sense to me right now. But anyway, they're in Moombaton and they get that notice. Yeah. Like Gwen's like, beware that, be careful, Gwen. Canon event is forthcoming. Be ready for it. That kind of thing. That's the first time I noticed it. The first time I watched the movie. But this canon event stuff goes all the way back to the conflict
Vulture.
With the Vulture.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're not listening for them to say canon. That's a word that's only discussed by fans
Star Wars,
outside.
Right?
Well, no, but it's never discussed in a medium. It's always a meta discussion,
Yeah,
we always talk about canon and stuff outside of the story. You'd never expect a story to mention its own canon in a way. That's just such a weird concept that you would never be listening for them to say that word. So
we should have, though, because of our history with Star Wars canon. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. I did want to make sure I don't miss one of my favorite visual scenes, and it happens so quickly.
It was, yeah.
Nathan and I talked about it kind of in detail, and I'm going to bring it up a little bit later too in the dad moment, I have a feeling. But there's the scene where Gwen is talking about her life with her dad in those opening sequences, her family, and you see it's maybe a 6-second segment, but it flips super fast between multiple frames where you see different lighting and different items on the kitchen or the dinner table and different clothing from everybody.
Hairstyles on Gwen.
Different hairstyles on Gwen. So you know that this is happening multiple times, but it is the idea of the Stacy family coming together regularly for a family dinner and saying a prayer, saying grace or a blessing before that. And as someone of faith, someone that is what we do in our family, man, it felt so good to see that being portrayed. It wasn't like slapping people in the face.
No.
It wasn't like, I would utilize Blue Bloods as an example of, it can be heavy-handed, right? Blue Bloods, it's like we're doing this every episode. It's intentional. Please pay attention. We're having family dinner now, and we're going to say a prayer. And that's fine. It's one of the things I love about Blue Bloods. But it wouldn't have worked doing it in this setting.
Well, it's just like how they portrayed anything in the movie. With Moombaton, that culture, they showcased the culture, but not in a heavy-handed way. No. It was interesting, and it was reverential. Is that a word?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. And same with even Spider-Punk and the whole like punk side of British culture and stuff too. It wasn't heavy-handed. It felt natural and it worked. Just like, this prayer.
But the thing that I loved the most about it was really you can look at this entire movie and see that the Stacy family in Gwen's universe, at least, we don't see that played out in any other universe. But in Gwen's universe, the Stacy family is being portrayed as a very conservative, pro NYPD.
PDNY.
Well, is it PDNY in that one?
I think so.
Okay. Anyway, but you know what I'm saying? Like pro police, pro conservative, pro Christian, setting. And it wasn't done negatively and it wasn't done heavy handed. It was just like, this is who they are. Just like you see that same thing being portrayed with Miles and his family. Miles and his family are being portrayed as a multi-ethnic, diverse family that's living in Brooklyn, that's all about their culture, all about their background, all their history. And you don't get slapped in the face with it either. It's just done well.
Because it's just who they are.
It's just who they are.
It doesn't feel like they wrote a character around portraying those things. Those things just naturally fell into the characters.
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
And we were talking about it, I think maybe even on the way home.
It was on the way home.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
How, you've got Lord and Miller, right? Lord and Miller are not Puerto Rican, African American, individuals, right? For Moonbatten in Indian culture, that kind of thing. And yet they have found a way to bring in people or whatever to understand those cultures and to be able to portray those cultures effectively in such a powerful way. And it just felt right. Every culture they seemed to portray felt like it honored that. And at times it poked fun at it.
Absolutely.
Like in Moonbatten, he pokes fun at himself and that culture, but not in a negative way. Never felt like it was a shtick. With it. I loved that. All right, we're going to talk about that for another 20 minutes probably if I went on. The canon events, right? They go crazy. You've got all of these moments happening and kind of tying it back to the Gwen and Miles story. They have very similar arcs going on in their story.
But apparently every Spider-Man does.
That apparently all of them have. And, if this was the What If story from MCU, this would be, what are they called? Absolute points.
Absolute points.
Yep. In that Doctor Strange episode and some of the other stuff.
Best episode.
Moments that cannot be changed. 100%. In fact, in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, an absolute point with that would almost be the death of... I'm trying to remember, but I thought that there was an absolute point.
Not really.
I thought, I guess the absolute point I'm still mixing with Christine's death and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nathan's mad at me because I brought up Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. He's just giving me dirty looks. Okay. Miguel, all right, and Spider Society. Let's just I'll start with you, Nate. Let's just go ahead and get out Spider Society stuff right now. Anything that you want to say about the Spider Society or about the different Spider-Men or anyone that you wanted to focus on that we haven't talked about yet or any of that before we get into like the meat of that segment?
I really want to talk about Miguel, but that was awesome. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But no, it was awesome to see Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yeah, it was
have
really
some
cool
lines
for us.
and have a cameo because that was a show that was very underappreciated back when it came out, but is now a cult classic among the Spider-Man fans. It was really good. One of the best Spider-Man animated shows we've gotten, and sadly was canceled prematurely. I'm pretty
very
sure.
much like Tron on
Uprising.
Yeah.
Dang it! Come on.
No, that was awesome to see. It was awesome to see Insomniac Spider-Man and have him have a couple lines.
Spider-Man, yeah.
As Insomniac Spider-Man, that was cool. Of course, the special live action cameo from Donald Glover, which has multiple layers of coolness to it. Not just he's from the MCU. It's because Donald Glover was the inspiration for Miles Morales from Community of all shows.
Yeah, explain that for the people that may not know.
So when Amazing Spider-Man came out, there was an episode of Community where Troy Barnes, Donald Glover's character, dressed up in a Spider-Man shirt, and that was apparently the inspiration originally for kind of giving them having a Spider-Man that would work that way, and so they gave it Miles Morales, and Donald Glover actually
in the comics. You mean they created that character?
And then when Miles Morales was introduced in one of the Spider-Man animated shows, Donald Glover voiced him.
Okay,
so. He's very tied into the history of Miles.
Which is cool then to see in Homecoming him play.
Yes, his uncle, Aaron Davis, and now the Prowler for the MCU. It was cool to see that as well.
Okay, we'll come back to Miguel. So, Nate or Sam, that's your name, right?
That is my name.
All right, Sam. Any crazy Spider Society stuff?
No, I mean Nathan kind of hit all the big ones. Really, it was just cool to see all the There were so many great cameos. It was tough to focus on the story the first watch through because I was just sitting there trying to catch all the little cameos. But I even saw at one point there was one spider person. I think it was a Spider Woman, but she had a hockey stick.
Oh, yeah. Canadian Spider Woman.
Wearing the Canadian flag too.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was cool. It was just neat to see all the different representations of Spider-Man. And in a way, it's kind of back to how they represented all these different cultures very well. There's a spider person for everybody too.
Oh, that's cool.
There was even I think there was a spider person who was in a wheelchair and stuff. There was all the sorts of different variations just to kind of show anybody can be a spider person. So I thought that was kind of neat. There were a lot of cool different ones. There were a couple of symbols that I liked, and I haven't seen that one before. If that were going to be my suit, that'd be my symbol. Just lots of cool little moments like that.
That's cool. Let's get to talking about Miguel. Is Miguel the bad guy?
He's the antagonist.
Yes.
He's not a bad guy.
He's not a bad guy.
Explain.
Well, I mean, he's definitely opposed to the main character. If that's not the definition of an antagonist in a story, I don't know what is. But he's doing it for the quote-unquote right reasons. He's not only convicted that what he's doing is right, but he's got empirical evidence to show that what he's doing seems to be necessary, right? He shows that he tried to do what Miles did once, and it destroyed an entire reality. That's kind of what happened. That's what happened to Doctor Strange in that What If episode. He literally collapsed all of reality. So he gets it. But we know that he can't be right because Miles is the main character. I mean, that's just how it works. But while he's never trying to actively destroy Miles or anything in that way, and he's got people on his side, and the entire Spider Society is on Miguel's side, but he's still opposed to the main character, thus making him an antagonist, but not a bad guy.
No.
All right, BB Nate, you said you had thoughts on Miguel.
Yeah, Sam kind of took most of them.
Sorry.
But,
well, you took all my Spider Society stuff. So.
But no, I really do feel like Miguel is such an interesting, complex character because he's not a bad guy. And I don't think anybody should think he's a villain or a bad guy even, because he is just an antagonist. He is opposing the main character, but his methods are accurate. As good guys, you're supposed to stop from people dying. And so Miles is possibly creating an event to where an entire
what
reality...
happens in Moonbatten.
Right. He might be creating an event where an entire reality might die. That's murder. And so Miguel, as a Spider-Man, is trying to stop that from happening. He has every right. And even Miguel says he doesn't like what he has to do sometimes, which is fair. He's a Spider-Man who will do whatever it takes to be able to get the job done, which is respectable in some ways and dangerous in others. And so I feel like his character is a good guy. He's opposed from the main character, and of course I'm sure we'll see a way for Miles to come out on top in the next movie. If we don't, then that would be sad, but I think that we'll see Miguel kind of start to learn that there are other ways for Spider-Man to act in these situations. But who knows? I just thought he was a super cool character.
Yeah, but I mean, this is literally like an extreme version of the trolley problem, right? That ethical dilemma of this trolley is going to hit one person. Do you take action and flip the switch to save that or it's going to like hurt 5 people, but you can flip the switch and hurt one person to save the many. You know, it's that idea of do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So it's really interesting to see those kind of ethical dilemmas handled in this story and seeing the different perspectives on it.
I don't think we can move out of this part of the segment before we talk about Miles a little bit more without bringing up Hobie.
Oh, he was cool.
Hobie is Miles, as you said, Dad.
Okay. So, yeah. So, I mean, when did you guys realize that Hobie has to be Miles Morales in his universe?
I only really figured it out when you mentioned it, but as soon as you mentioned it, it made total sense.
I mean, it makes sense, but I don't know if that's 100% true.
It has to be.
I understand how it has to be.
That's why he talks about he's not revealing his secret identity. Then he takes off of his mask, and it's like he's got the Miles hair, and then he's got the same same skill set as Miles.
He knows how to tell Miles what to do.
He's communicating to Miles what to do. He's trying to get Miles to go against the Miguel and against what the you write your own story type stuff with this. So. He's clearly.
Plus, that's why.
And then the second that Miles does that, finally he leaves. He's like, "I'm out."
Yep, he's got it. But that's also why it seems like Gwen and him have a cool relationship.
Right,
they connect, so it makes sense.
So let's talk a little bit about writing your own story, because that's really the through line in Miles' character and his plot throughout this. It even starts with the blank page in the guidance counselor's office. What's your story? I don't know who this kid is. So, it's write the story, and then and all of that. It kind of goes all the way through to the very end when he's like, "No, I'm gonna. What does he say? I'm gonna do my own thing." Right. With that, BB Nate.
Yes.
Is it wrong for Miguel to put his entire, and I'll qualify it in a second, put his entire reality at risk in order to try to save his dad?
Miguel?
Or is he
Miles? You mean Miles, right?
Miles. You said Miguel.
Did I say Miguel? I said Miles. So my apologies. Is it wrong for Miles to put his entire reality at risk in order to save his dad, or is he not actually putting his entire reality at risk because of the fact that he's the original? What is they even call it? Variant? What anomaly with that. It is so funny to hear them talk about the different realities and variants, but they're calling them anomalies and all that kind of stuff.
We don't know. We don't know if it's a problem or not, and that's where Miguel is coming from. A rather safe than sorry kind of aspect from it, because this is a canon event for Spider-Man. And if Miles is the Spider-Man of that universe, at least he is right now, then he has to have that happen according to what every single other Spider-Man in existence has gone through. And so if that doesn't happen, which it isn't happening to Gwen anymore, really, at least not to her dad.
Because her dad
resigns. But Spider-Man needs to have this happen to grow his character. So that has to be his dad. So he has to have it happen. So judging from what statistics say and from what the algorithm says, it has to be Captain Morales. Yeah,
It's Jefferson Davis.
Okay, that confused me. Why is he Miles Morales, but it's Jefferson Davis?
Because he took his mom's name.
Okay.
But he also called himself Captain Morales when he introduced himself to Gwen. So that was funny. But
I'm totally confused now.
His name is Jefferson Davis, but he calls it Captain Morales. So we see all of this happen, and we understand that this is what could cause his reality to break. So I don't know if Miles is 100% right, but also as Spider-Man, he's trying to find ways to do both. Keep his reality in check while saving his dad. So I'm sure that that's what we're going to find out in the next movie of how it can happen.
There might be an out, as we saw with Gwen and her dad, right? He resigned, he stepped down, thus not making him the police captain anymore. Thus, he's not in harm's way anymore, which is also a cool detail. I don't know if y'all ever noticed this, but in that scene when they're talking, he's wearing the police uniform, but by the end, all of the badges and the walkie-talkie and stuff, it turns into sketches. And then it eventually, by the time she walks through the portal, it's completely gone.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
because
amazing.
he quit halfway through her big speech. You know, it's such a cool little detail that you just don't they don't put it. It's not obvious, but if you notice it, it's a cool little detail. But that scene is there to me at least, to show that there's a way out for Miles.
Any prediction as to how he's going to find his way out of this?
Peter.
I don't know.
Miles has to go find the Peter that was supposed to be bit in Earth 42.
Was he going to go and bite some random guy in New York 42?
He's just going to find Peter Parker. It was supposed to be Peter Parker from that universe. At least that's what the best chance would be. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if that Peter's working at Alchemax and he's able to get him home through a collider or something like that. And then he finds, because that would give that Peter a purpose of that universe.
He's going to have his work cut out for him, though.
That's true.
World.
But I feel like that's what his next step would be. Logically, at least that's what I would think. If I was stuck in another universe where there was supposed to be a Spider-Man, and I'd go to the person that was supposed to be Spider-Man. So it just kind of makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to think that clearly. Like, oh, yeah, let me go find Peter Parker in this universe.
Miles is pretty smart.
He is smart, but I don't think that's exactly what he's got. He's trying to figure out how to get back to his universe.
He has better plans than you know.
Okay.
Well, I mean, he planned out that whole thing for the Spider Society. You just didn't tell us yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think Miles, spoilers, are going to eventually somehow come to terms and work together.
No.
You don't think so?
No, I don't.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, I 100% think so. I think we're going to see a cool Miles Spider-Man, Miles Prowler working side by side.
That'd be cool, but I don't think it'll happen.
For something.
I am your father.
Yeah, we discussed it briefly, but I want to come back to it here in this week's Dad Moment. My favorite part of this movie will probably slip past most cinema goers. It could easily get overlooked in the great performances and all the stunning visuals and the powerful story. But for me, what makes Across the Spider-Verse truly special is that it portrays family in such a healthy way. And it's not just Miles and Rio and Jeff. They're great, of course. I mean, the struggles of parenting a child who's growing up and trying to write their own story is something that I relate to so much. And yes, it creates conflict in the story, but their family relationship stays strong throughout it. You have other families in the film that are amazing as well, like Peter and MJ and Mayday. They're great. But my favorite family is Gwen and George Stacy. Their conflict is central in this story from very start to the very finish. And it's much more intense. But in spite of all of their misunderstandings and all of their struggles, Gwen's love for George never comes into question. And even more importantly, George's love for Gwen doesn't either. It is so refreshing to see a story of this magnitude treat that parent-child relationship with so much dignity and honor. And I hope this gets continued in the final installment. Well, thank you for listening to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. We are a part of the Christian Nerd HQ. We have podcasts Monday through Friday coming out in our feed. We have Monday, we have the Christian Nerds Unite podcast. On Tuesday, we have this one, which you're listening to right now, which you already know that because I'm sure you listen to it on Tuesdays when it comes out. Right? Anyway, and then on Wednesdays, we have Fangirling Over Jesus with Ashley Cox. Thursdays, we have The Reverend and The Reprobate. And then Fridays, we have Speaking Nerdy. The links to all of these shows are in the show notes below. Check them out. Give ratings and reviews to all of us. Follow all of the shows on social media. Follow the network on social media. Christian Nerd HQ. Just look for that. Christian Nerd HQ. It's easy on that so that you can stay engaged with not just this show, but all of the shows that we have out on our in the Christian Nerdverse. Is that what we got to come up with a Spider-Verse, arachnid, polynoid, multiversal nerd Christian verse something like that. Anyway, it's probably time for me to end this. Share the show with your friends. Please help us get the word out about the podcast and everything else that we've got going on. And until we talk again.
May the force be with you, always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.